Okay, so next I'd like to invite Paul Atkins to stage. I've had the opportunity to work with Professor Atkins for the last 6 or 7 months. This is the department that I graduated from 25 years ago, so there's a soft spot in my heart. But he has a unique gift, and he is an expert, a leading expert in Japanese literature, and has this amazing gift of making ancient literature incredibly interesting. So with that, Professor Atkins.
Thank you, Eugene. Some of us traveled a long way to be here. We have somebody came all the way from Morocco. Many of us left behind at home our loved ones. The 31-syllable poetic form called waka, or tanka, which has been written continuously in Japan for the past 1,500 years, took both travel and love as two of its most important themes. The handling of these themes was governed by tradition and convention. Love poems typically talked about the agony of longing and the suffering of parting, with the good parts in between left out. I guess those people were too busy to write poems when they were celebrating. In the world of waka, travelers are always traveling away from the capital, not toward it, and they are always miserable due to the rigors of travel and the pain of separation from the beloved. Here is a poem that talks about both of these themes. It was written 800 years ago on the topic longing during a journey, tabi no koi. 草枕一人明かしの裏風に糸の涙ぞ落ちまさりける On a pillow of grass, alone I watch the sunrise over Akashi Bay, and in the breeze my tears fall all the more heavily. Akashi Bay is located in western Japan, in Hyogo Prefecture near the city of Kobe. The poet puns on the place name Akashi and Akasu, which means to still be awake when the sun comes up. He's miserable because he's sleeping out in the open and he misses his beloved. That's all you need to know about this poem, and that's really about all that can be said about it. This is a terrible poem. It doesn't add anything to our understanding of the topic, it doesn't do anything interesting with language, and it's not particularly elegant. It was composed for the poetry contest in 600 rounds, Rokyakuban Futa Awase, which was held in the capital of Kyoto in 1193. A list of 100 topics was issued to 12 poets. They each submitted 100 poems, and then the 12 poets were divided into two teams, the left and the right, of 6 poets each. Then the poems were matched, one by one from each team, in 600 rounds. The team members were then invited to criticize their opponent's poems and to defend their own. And in the end, a judge decided each round, a win, loss, or draw. He issued his decision and his reasons for it for every round of 600. Fortunately, this being Japan, we have records of the entire match. And they teach us a great deal about what people thought Japanese poetry was and what good poetry could do. The poem I showed you was from the right team, and it lost. Let me show you the winner from the left team. Makura ni mo ato ni mo tsuyu no tama chirite hitorioki iru sayo no nakayama. Onto my pillow, onto the foot of my bed, jewels of dew scatter as I remain awake and alone on Midnight Mountain. This poem also contains a place name. Midnight Mountain, Sayo no Nakayama, is a steep path along the Tokaido Road between Tokyo and Kyoto in the mountains of Shizuoka Prefecture. This poem also puns on a place name, and the speaker cannot sleep either. But it does so much more than the other poem does. As the air grows cold at night, the dew begins to fall. The speaker watches it form on his pillow and his rough bed out in the open. It looks as if someone has scattered a handful of diamonds or pearls. That much you can discern for yourself. But there's something hidden in this poem. It alludes to another poem that was written over 300 years earlier by an anonymous poet. Makura yori ato yori koi no seme kureba, sem kata namizo, tokonaka ni oru. From my pillow, from the foot of my bed, longing strikes, and I have no choice but to sit in the middle. This is a poem that personifies desire as a kind of demon that attacks the speaker at night, and he or she tries to escape by sitting in the middle, which is sad, and at the same time, it's kind of clever. The poem was famous because it had been included in the imperial anthology Kokinshu, compiled in 905, the anthology of ancient and modern waka. By alluding to it in the phrases "onto my pillow" and "onto the foot of the bed," the author of the later poem, the poem from the left that won the contest, gave his short poem an added layer of density that helped him transcend the limits of this very brief form. This practice, which is called elusive variation, or honkadori, is one of the defining characteristics of a new poetic style that emerged in the late 12th century. Poets were operating under the constraints of a very traditional form, and they had several centuries of precedence in the form of previous poems, crushing them, weighing them down, hemming them in. Breaking with tradition entirely was out of the question, but they found ways to innovate within the tradition. They used old words in a new way. In his poetic treatise Eiga no Taigai, Essentials of Poetic Composition, the poet Fujiwara no Teika laid out a theory of innovation. He wrote, "Kokoro wa atarashiki o saki to su, hito no imada yomazaru kokoro o motomete kore wo eizu. Kotoba wa furuki o motomete mochiu beshi." Give priority to new feelings. Seek feelings that no one else has written about and write about them. Seek out old words and use them. Borrowing words from old poems came with its own risks. This so-called new poetry might not be new at all, but excessively derivative. And therefore, Teika's treatise included rules of allusion that forbade poets from taking more than half of the words of their poems from another poem, from borrowing from the work of poets from recent times, and from borrowing famous phrases associated with specific poets, no matter how old they were. These concepts, I think, are very familiar to us now. We call them copyright, fair use, and trademark. This is the conclusion, this is the end. What this means for us, all of it in the present day, is something that I'll leave you to figure out. You can do a better job of it than I can, and I don't have anything special to add. But I would like to offer you 3 thoughts based on what I know about medieval Japanese poetry. Number 1, innovation is not always about creating something completely new from whole cloth, but also from rearranging elements that already existed in novel ways. Number 2, innovation is not always celebrated, it is resisted. The new style of poetry that I showed you in this example was condemned by the conservative poetic establishment at the time. They called it Daruma Uta, or Bodhidharma poetry, which meant it sounded like gibberish along the lines of the koan and other forms of paradoxical discourse from Zen Buddhism, which was just making inroads into Japan at this time. We now regard this style of poetry as classic. And 3, the last thing I'd like to say is that innovation is about making it new. But innovation is itself not new at all. Everything around us, our technology, our financial and legal systems, our political systems, these things that we take for granted like the air were once new. Representative democracy, contact lenses, money is an invention. They were once radical. Like the poets of medieval Japan, we might look to the past in order to create the future. Thank you very much for listening. like to, if I may, show you, I brought back a prize for you. This is the picture of the commendation that the Japanese Language, Literature, and Culture program of the Department of Asian Languages and Literature at UW received Tuesday evening in Seattle at the official residence of the Consul General of Japan in Seattle, Consul General Yamada. You see on the left the commendation, and I'm receiving it from him, and at the bottom the certificate. This was issued by Foreign Minister Kono Taro, the Gaimusho Daijin Sho. We're very proud to have received it. It's going to be hanging in my office for a while, and I wanted to show it to you because it belongs really to all of us. Thank you.